Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the third session of the Connect for Impact webinar series being hosted by Eager Foundation. In the last 2 days, we have had speakers from Sarkar and Bazaar discuss their respective roles in transforming India's urban governance. For our Sarkar webinar on Wednesday, we had Dr. R.S. Sharma, former chairman of TRI, as the keynote speaker, and Jagan Shah, senior advisor at DFID, moderating a panel on preparing our cities for the 21st century. Yesterday, in the Bazaar webinar, Dr. Pramod Verma, CTO at Ek Step Foundation, was the keynote speaker, and Deepti Dutt, head of strategic initiatives at AWS, moderated a panel on the role of open digital infrastructure in catalyzing governance transformation at scale. Today, we'll be discussing the role of Samaaj, or society, in shaping India's cities. I'll briefly talk about the agenda for today's webinar. We will begin with the opening address by Viraj Tyagi, a keynote speech by Rohini Nilikani, highlights of eGov's impact report by Hiren Doshi, followed by a panel discussion. So without any further delay, I'd like to invite Viraj Tyagi, CEO of eGov Foundation, to deliver the welcome address. Viraj.
Thanks, Adi. Namaskar, good afternoon, and good morning, wherever you are. And thank you for joining us this afternoon. This is the series of our Samaaj Sarkar Bazaar webinar. This is the third and final webinar. And I think a lot of you have been part of our journey. So thank you for being supportive and being part of this journey. So from systems to ecosystems, I think that's the kind of theme I want to talk about. And I think what I'll do is, rather than talk about broad strategy and what how it works, talk about a few stories. One of the most interesting thing about last 5 years in this developmental sector for me has been just going to the field and talking to people and seeing how they experience and emote with various things which are happening around us. So, so first is a quote by, next slide, please. So this is Steve Jobs. Technology is nothing. What is important is that you have a faith in people, that they're basically good and smart. And if you give them tools, they'll do wonderful things with them. This really rings true with the kind of work we do as a mission. Sometimes sitting in Bangalore, we can lose sight of the actual human beings behind this technology, in front of this technology, who are actually using it and are being impacted by this. And I think user experience is a very, very sometimes dehumanizing word. It's really how users feel, right? So I think I'll tell you 4 stories from the field, and then after that, relate it back to what we're doing. So first story is this young girl, Adi Lakshmi. She is a part of a self-help group in Chirala, which is a small town of 80,000 people in coastal Andhra Pradesh. And she's a community volunteer. She raises issues on service delivery and everything on behalf of community. And this was April 2018, a hot day, and we are talking to people in the self-help group. And we happen to mention that we have built this app called Pura Seva for raising complaints. And she gets really excited, and she starts talking about how 3 days ago, the train she's standing next to, which looks clean now, was overflowing with sewage. And she actually was very worried because last year 2 people died because of dengue, because of the same situation. So she raises a complaint, and in a over of 10 hours, the commissioner personally either called her or SMS'd her, saying, really asking about the progress. And this was fixed in 12 hours. So this was a beautiful moment, that a young girl who's a volunteer can actually be connected, have the access, and feel empowered that she can actually contribute to the community. Second story is from Punjab. This is Subhash. He's a revenue officer in Zirakpur, a small industrial town next to Chandigarh. And we were talking to him about how his day is. And he said, half of his day he spends in this godown where all the land records and the property tax records are there. And whenever a citizen comes and he asks for an old record, they have to come in here and search for it. And he made this comment, कि मेरा जो cousin है वो taxi चलाता है, पर उसके पास भी app है. It's almost that he felt he was being left behind, that he's still in 20th century where the world has moved on. And it's very interesting, sometimes we see government as inefficient, old-fashioned. But the aspirations of individuals who work there are very similar. They also want ERPs. They also, want to have automation. They also want to do a good job. Next slide, please. This is a phone conversation. This is very recent. We're doing a survey of recently with the Punjab government. We did a WhatsApp chatbot for citizens to submit complaints, and now soon they'll be able to pay their bills also through WhatsApp. And we're talking to this lady Neeru, and she said, yeah, it was easy to do it. They still took 3 days to solve it. But it's very, and she made an interesting comment with kind of hit home. Said, but it's good. Government is finally on my WhatsApp contact list. Now we all know we have this family, locality, building, WhatsApp groups. A lot of interactions happen. For somebody to say government is on my WhatsApp list is almost like there is a nearness with the government, because sometimes we think government and citizen is slightly removed from each other, and there's almost like a sense of friction. Whereas when you put something in the context that the citizen is already in, she already uses WhatsApp very, very regularly, and she can do what she has to do to transact with government through WhatsApp. This creates a new kind of a dynamic between the government and the citizen. I won't say it's intimate, but at least there's a closeness. There's a feeling of access. There's a feeling of that I can talk to my government, which is quite powerful in my mind. Final story is actually of a administrator. This is Mr. Shrikant, again a small town in Andhra Pradesh, Elluru. And we walked into his office very hot afternoon in August 2018, and we wanted to check with him how things are going, how he's using the system. And I'm sitting across this table where you see him now, and he's just every 30 seconds looks at his tablet and doing things. Sometimes he's smirking, sometimes he's smiling, sometimes he's frowning. I'm saying, what's happening? Is it another day where you sit in a government official's office and you waste time? And I kind of politely ask him, sir, what is on your tab? She said, come around. So he's actually looking at a list of all the black spots in real time, and he's assigning it to sanitation officers to fix it. So I think the words he used was, I can respond. I'm in control. I know what is happening. Because a lot of times we assume government is in a position of power, but a lot of times because of lack of tools, lack of capacity, lack of data, even commissioners are really struggling to make sense out of it. So this has really, made us think very hard, some of these experiences collectively we've had over the last, so many years, that what is the role we should play? What is the role technology plays? What is the role other actors need to play? And how do we solve this problem, at scale? Because for a long time, we assume that technology can solve a lot of the problems. But I think sometimes what our awareness has built over the last few years is really, unless a lot of actors come together and we play a role of really almost like a digital public good, kind of a railroad or a enabler, and then their capacity and their own context come into play to solve problems, that's when real magic happens. Next slide, please. So this is what the construct looks like, which is basically very simple, to solve large societal problems, which are by nature complex. And a country like India is, very, very complex. It's a subcontinent, in more than 23 languages, more than 4,400 towns and cities, more than 32 crore people living there. So I think we did a lot of work with Sarkar in our earlier years, building systems for them. Of late, done a lot of work with Bazaar in terms of really getting to participate and build on top of the platform. I think we believe unless all three elements of a societal change come together, which is Samaaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar, and this is Rohini's term, and she'll be talking about this later. And unless they all have, in their own context, ability to solve problems enabled by some kind of a technology, and Pramod spoke about this yesterday, that solving is subscale. You can solve a point solution, but you can't solve a large problem unless you distribute the ability to solve. You cannot really scale this. So I think over the last 2.5 or so years, we have really actively engaged with all the actors to see how it can come together to kind of make a different scale. And that reflects in our business model, operating model. Next slide, please. So this is a very simple depiction of how it looks like. So at the foundation of this is a foundational digital platform, which is basically open source. It's like a public good, accessible to all without any restrictions, through open APIs, through a lot of tools and knowledge assets which are available. And this really helps deliver services at scale. Okay, so that's the first part, and it's a very important part, because unless you have that, you can't really do things at scale. Second is what we call co-creation ecosystem, where ecosystem actors from Samaaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar come together to solve problems. Now, our role here is to actually be an enabler, or be a catalyst, or be a connector, but not to overtly get involved in doing things, because I think the contexts are so different. Unless people who are really into that context work on it, the problem will not be solved. So we kind of see our role as more as a enhancing the capacities of actors in some ways to leverage the digital platform, and then really they come together. The last part of it is where the rubber hits the road, where programs and things get delivered to citizens, which helps ease their living or build capacity. And these are impact programs. So they could be government-run programs, like I give you example of Punjab and Andhra Pradesh. They're statewide programs. They could be programs run by central government at times, which is programs like in Northeast, delivering building plan certificates for 6 states online. Or they could be programs driven by actors in the NGOs. For example, Kuldeep is here. We're working with Reap Benefit. We're working with Sanja Sikhiya in Punjab to see how they can amplify. This is all about amplification. How do you amplify the impact by joining forces? And this is about real teamwork from a co-creation point of view. Next slide, please. So this is this is our mission. Catalyze urban transformation and enhance ease of living by embedding an open digital infra to improve governance in all 4,400 towns and cities. 2 words I want to kind of emphasize: catalyze. This is something. This is not a mission one organization or 3 organizations or 5 organizations can do. This is something all these 3 actors have to come together in various contexts to kind of do the work. And that means our role as a mission is more a enabling role, more a role of connector, more a role of catalyst. And that's what it means by catalyzing. Second thing is ease of living. Sometimes when you work with government, because government is the biggest service delivery arm, a lot of your energy can be sucked into solving their problems. I think philosophically what we believe is, unless the work which is happening, whether it's Samaaj, Sarkar or Bazaar, unless that leads to ease of living getting better, unless it leads to better cities, unless it leads to participative cities, unless it leads to ease of access, unless it leads to equity, we are not doing our job. So my kind of appeal to the people from this sector in Samaaj is to really join forces and work as a team and help us design things which can really make impact in communities, because we are good at scale, but we are not good at context. I think context is people who work in communities day in and day out, they know much better. And I think if you can bring that context into the ecosystem, then it can really help us solve problems at scale. So I look forward to working with lots of you in coming months and years. And thank you very much for listening in, and over to you, Adi.
Thank you, Viraj, for capturing this importance of transferring the potential of technology into the benefits for the most important stakeholder, which is the citizen, and also for this call of action for the civil society to come together and really empower the citizens. I'd now like to invite Rohini Nilikani as the keynote speaker of today's webinar. Rohini needs very little introduction, but Rohini Nilikani is the founder-chairperson of Arghyam, a foundation she set up for sustainable water and sanitation, which funds initiatives all across India. From 2004 to 2014, she was also the founder-chairperson of Pratham Books, a non-profit children's publisher that has reached millions of children during her tenure. Rohini and her husband Nandan are signatories to the Giving Pledge, a commitment to give half of their wealth to philanthropic causes. Rohini writes and speaks regularly on the need to align Samaaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar for inclusive development. Rohini, if I can request you to take Viraj's lead from Viraj's address and share your learnings and experiences with us on building a good and sustainable society by enabling and empowering Samaaj. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Viraj. Thank you, Aditya. So I have 15 minutes and let me just share a few things with all of you. I hope you're all keeping safe. It's always good to ask, how are you all? Even if you can't respond, I hope you are doing well. So I have been, going from Bengaluru to Kabini a lot in these last few months, sort of escaping into the forest. And so every time I return from the forest and from this rural countryside to this mega city, Bengaluru, it seems as though my eyes and my senses hit refresh each time. And I see my home city from a new perspective. And the overwhelming impression is of a city undergoing a painful renewal. Okay, masses of threatening concrete overhead, piles of rubble underneath, with all manner of dangerous spikes poking outward. And through this gray canvas, dots of color as hapless citizens do their best to head on through this traffic without signposts, without proper visibility sometimes, and navigating through large trucks and haulers and past moody traffic signals or perplexing roundabouts. And it seems as if this city, like many other towns and cities in the country, is actually testing its residents, okay? The unfinished infrastructure is a poster promise of a better future at the far horizon. And the city demands patience, demands faith, demands hope. The residents, on the other hand, experience resignation, weariness, and a kind of lasting numbness sometimes. And when I finally get home, I enter an urban version of the forest that I left behind, because my neighborhood in Koramangala has a dense canopy of trees with a mix of mammals and avian diversity. But Bangalore is not at all homogeneous. It has a crisscross of diverse identities and designs. It has layers and layers, like all cities, of privilege on top and tiers of disenfranchisement below. And yet, the dysfunctionality of the city creates a perverse equalizer. It brings an end to the secession of the elite, as I have written before. Our bubble breaks with the chaos of the traffic, with the pervasive pollution, and with the squeezing of personal spaces. Which brings me really to the point of my keynote, that there are now new opportunities to engage with the city's future, and the visible cracks themselves create this opening. So, and as you have heard and will continue to hear, many groups are engaging citizens to reimagine the city and make it their own. The question has moved from whether the city will grow and change to how it should grow and change, and further to who should participate in the change making. Kevin Lynch, in his 1960 classic, The Image of the City, says very simply but importantly, the metropolitan region is now the functional unit of our environment. That's important, the functional unit of our environment. And it is desirable that this functional unit should be identified and structured by its inhabitants. The good news is that many new citizens-based nodes are challenging the supremacy of the state in urban futures. Whether it is the thriving RWAs in the city, the many new dynamic CSOs and NGOs, there seems to be this growing determination to take back the city. And these new efforts that I'm seeing build on many movements in Bangalore, at least, which I have personally experienced since the 80s, to improve governance of the city. I always joke that there are more urban reformers per square foot in Bengaluru than anywhere else in the world. And these efforts were made both on the supply side and the demand side. BATF was set up in the SM Krishna administration to bridge the demand side to the supply side and make the supply side more coordinated. Then Janagraha came along to set up, to broaden the scope and ambition of citizen engagement in governance of the city. EGA Foundation, that we are all part of the webinar of, came along to help government use technology more effectively to collect and analyze data to create better access to its various services. And these are only 3 out of dozens of examples. So today's Samaaj is evolving even further. Today's technologies enable mass participation in civic design for the first time ever, right? And therefore, hopefully after that, the better delivery of public services. This is happening in all the major metropolitan areas of the country and is now extending beyond. I'll give you some examples. Viraj already talked of REAP benefit and others, but let me just go into very short descriptors of some of the ones that I'm working with. There's Yugantar in Hyderabad. Sometimes even the simplest data is not available in public, right? Though Viraj gave such great examples of when it is available, but an RTI sometimes needs to be filed for even the simplest of information. And when the lockdown was announced, Yugantar filed an RTI to get the total number of slums and their population in Greater Hyderabad Municipal Corporation. And that data was shared with local NGOs who started to target relief and health work. As simple as that. There's Haya in Delhi. They look at the issue of access to sexual and reproductive health services, especially for unmarried girls. They did a campaign called Health Over Stigma, and it was spearheaded by young women. And Haya helped to hold service providers accountable for giving safe and non-judgmental sexual and reproductive health services. And now the Delhi Medical Council, etc., have committed to providing these services throughout the New Delhi region. REAP benefit has been talked about. It has developed an open civic platform that comprises of a WhatsApp chatbot, a web app, and a civic forum. And it guides first-time users with simple steps using a variety of civic challenges that are both fun and engaging. And by using decentralization and communitization, as they call it, lots of people can get better access through WhatsApp. So if you see a pothole on the road, you can type that into the chat box and send its photos and then have a discussion on what you should do about it. So then agitation and anxiety can turn into real action. They did a great job during COVID also, and apparently they were able to reach more than 1 million people with direct relief using this sort of decentralized community model. 2 more examples. Jhatka uses mobilization and awareness building to aggregate citizen voice. Last year, they rallied one of the biggest climate strikes in Bangalore. They gathered 1,500 people and created a lot of awareness videos, which got 3 million views, and 14,000 people signed the petition for cleaner air, because that's become such a throbbing sort of stimulus for people to get together, because if we can't breathe, what can we do? Civis looks at environmental legislation, which is usually so technical that people like us or civil society, we don't even know what's going on, even though we are impacted by what those laws are framing. So in March 2020, this environmental impact assessment notification, which was put up for public consultation, they organized it, put a simpler version for people to understand, and they received about 400 comments, and clearly those things are going to be now tabled when the final rules come out. We must, I do believe, applaud and encourage all these Samaaj-based efforts, both old and new. But more importantly, I think really that each of us has to find a way to participate in these attempts. We need a broader collective action of the Samaaj, because urban design is not a spectator sport. It really isn't. Good governance is not an entitlement. We have to co-create good governance. And no matter who you are, you're a citizen first. You may be a high-ranking government official. You may be the head of a very successful business, but that's just one extra hat that you wear, right? So you're a citizen under that. You're a part of your own Samaaj. And I do believe for years now, and my work is entirely devoted to this premise, that it is only the Samaaj and institutions of the Samaaj that can hold the state accountable to the larger public interest, can hold the markets accountable to the larger public interest, and also to the upholding of individual rights and freedoms, and to create and to make creative space for working together on these most complex problems that we are facing together as a society. Luckily, today's new technologies do allow us to participate more effectively with relative ease. But I'm not talking about collectivism. I'm not talking about, I am talking about how technology, as Virat was describing about what we call societal platform thinking, I'm talking about how a technology enabled social ecosystem, okay, can create discoverability of solutions, other people's solutions. It can create better access to services because we are all engaged in making the whole system better, and it can improve the ability to make meaningful choices. Here, I would say an important caution as one of my final points, which is that we need civil society itself to get much more digital in this inevitable digital age, so that a digital Samaj can keep tech corporations from amassing unconscionable power and from creating tools and products that distort the political and democratic processes, as we are beginning to see. It's more important than ever that organizations like IGA and other civil society organizations work together from the demand side and the supply side to strengthen society's own interactions and interfaces with the Samaj in their context and very directly, because we have to be careful that we prevent technologies and the amassing of power that will reduce individual or collective agency and that will strip meaning from social connection. These are not idle speculation, as you know, and the time has come for us to persevere patiently but creatively and challenge any technology future that is more of a dystopia than a solution to our current problems. So this battle has to be engaged in by Samaj and hopefully represented by civil society organizations, so that technology can be an enabler of our common intent for a good society. And so I would say to my audience here that I think we're at a very exciting inflection point. Urban is going to be reimagined and redesigned. This year of the virus has forced us to speed up our thinking on this. What will cities look like in the future? Because this is not the last pandemic, and this is only the beginning of climate change effects. We are seeing a cyclone right out in our neighborhood today, but this is not the first and nor will it be the last. So how are we going to adopt urban resilience? How are we going to teach ourselves urban resilience? I think technology plays a huge role. I think civil society plays a huge role. But moreover, each single one of us has to believe that we can participate and therefore we will. So that's it. How can we build on this momentum? How can we, as they all have begun to say, build back better rather than say new normal, right? How can we build back better? And so how can we create cities, and especially this city where I live, a city where we can be so proud to belong to, and in which all the children can actually breathe. Thank you and namaste.
Thank you so much, Rohini, for that insightful address and presenting some really sharp questions that all of us should be asking ourselves as citizens first, and thinking about the real needs from our cities and neighborhoods. And some of the organizations you talked about are a great source of. Thank you so much, Rohini. I will I will request all the attendees also to write their questions in the Q&A chat box. We will be answering them on chat as well as try to answer in the duration this webinar. Today, we are also releasing our impact report covering eGov's journey and impact through the last 17 years. I'd now like to invite Hiren Doshi, VP of Strategy and Partnerships at eGov, to share highlights of the eGov impact report.
Thank you, Adi.
Just a second.
And thank you, Rohini, for a spectacular keynote address. The two key takeaways for me is everybody is a citizen first and the role of technology to create a digital Samaaj. That's great. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for joining us today. Let me spend the next 10-15 minutes presenting the key highlights of the eGov impact report. Viraj highlighted the challenge that India faces due to rapid urbanization, and this will lead to exponential rise in demand for citizen services. We believe that technology will play a critical role in enabling such a large-scale transformation. But as was spoken just now, we also know that technology is only one piece of the puzzle. Next slide, please. At eGov, we have been at this effort for the last 17 years. And it is really satisfying to see footprint of eGov span across 2,400 cities. Next slide. In 14 states and impacting 160 million citizens. Adi, next slide. We have enabled our cities to become financially stronger by collecting more than 15,000 crore in revenues. We have enabled citizen participation in governance by helping register and redress over 3.5 million grievances on the platform. And the platform has also enabled over 25 million transactions between citizens and local government. Next slide. When we think about impact, we look at our most important stakeholder, which is the citizens. The ecosystem of stakeholder that revolves around improving the lives of our Indian citizens includes city and state government, central government, administrators and frontline employees, businesses, academia, research institutes, and civil society. And through our mission, we strive to meet the objectives of all the stakeholders. Apart from focusing on ease of living and participation for citizens, the impact framework which we use also measures gains in efficiency of the employees, financial sustainability of the ULBs, use of data and decision making, and new solutions built on Digit platform. And finally, the framework is meaningful only if it is positively contributing to improving trust amongst participants on the platform, building state capacity, and providing equitable access to everybody. Our very first impact report is our humble effort to highlight the change that eGov and our partner ecosystem have managed to bring in the lives of citizens, working alongside with the government. And we have tried to package this experience as a playbook and open sourced it to drive transformation at scale and speed across the country. We have attempted to present our experience working with states like Andhra Pradesh, Punjab, Uttarakhand, Odisha in the report as case studies with objective evaluation of what has worked, but also what is still work in progress. Next slide. Let me start with Andhra Pradesh. Our engagement with AP is very special, as this was the first time we had an opportunity to drive statewide urban governance transformation. AP, as we all know, has been a pioneer in leveraging technology for citizen-centered governance and inclusive growth. Back in 2015, the government of AP decided to create a common digital platform for all 110 ULBs in the state. This effort was combined with creation of new online channels while leveraging existing offline channels for citizens to interact and access the local government. And the AP government articulated a very clear vision, not just to resolve urban governance challenges in the state, but to raise the bar for municipal governance and service delivery for the entire country. Fast forward today, and the results are really noteworthy. Next slide. The program impacted lives of more than 1.4 crore citizens by digitizing over 35 citizen services. And as part of the program, government took a bold step of publishing the citizen charter. Not just that, in a radical departure from the norm, government also publicly announced policy to compensate citizens in case of slippage of SLAs. This strong focus on quality of service resulted in 90% of citizen requests being serviced within the publicly announced SLAs, reducing the grievance redressal time from 24 days to just 5 days. That's an improvement of over 500%. Next slide. The strong focus on eliminating manual process and digitizing it also helped build trust on the system and the system generated data. Another bold step to improve trust and participation by the citizens was to make a number of dashboards completely public. Today, a citizen, for that matter, anybody in India, can visit AP Municipal Administration website and view real-time data on number of services, as well as other indicators for their city, for their ward, or for their locality. Next slide. And one of the main benefits of digitally enabled governance system is that state leaders, administrators, and ULB employees can have access to reliable and structured data. This substantially improves their ability to manage ULB performance and direct resources to high traffic areas. Next slide. One of the core tenets of a truly public platform is that it provides ability for others to solve instead of trying to solve everything itself. And the open architecture of this platform has allowed multiple new solutions to be built and integrated with the platform. This has not only resulted in states' ability to innovate faster, but also saves time and money in avoiding duplication in building the foundational layers which are already existing on the core platform. And there are many such examples mentioned in the slide in front of you. Next slide. To highlight the versatility of the platform, when the government launched doorstep delivery of citizen services, the platform enabled enrollment of over 30,000 ward secretaries and 1.5 lakh ward volunteers on the platform. And the impact was to establish a vibrant and effective service delivery system for the state. Today, over 90% of service requests actually flows through this network. And this network was also repurposed in the time of emergency such as COVID. Next slide. Finally, we had recently conducted an independent survey to understand the impact of this platform called as Nagar Seva on the lives of citizens and employees. And the results were very interesting and satisfying. More than 74% of citizens saw greater access to government, with over 60% also seeing enhanced service delivery. Employees reported tremendous improvement in productivity, with over 11 hours saved per week, 11 hours per week from manual process, and over 96% seeing significant improvement in their ability to serve the citizens. Next slide. Coming to Punjab, a partnership with PMIDC started back in 2018. And after years of struggling to procure commercial software to digitize citizen services, in March of 2018, PMIDC decided to go with eGov's open platform called Digit. The PMIDC team felt that this platform-based approach will be faster to roll out and enable the state to build its capacity at a much lower cost. And rightly so, this was one of the fastest rollout of Digit we have seen. What normally takes 2 to 3 years in many other states for program of similar nature, in Punjab, we saw 100 ULBs go live in just 90 days. That was truly remarkable. And a lot of credit goes to Shri Ajay Sharma, who is the PMIDC CEO, and their entire team. One example, next slide. One example of the kind of transformation this platform brought is miscellaneous collection. Before Digit, the ULB employees had been using paper-based manual G8 slips while collecting miscellaneous payments for things like advertisement tax, parking charges, outdoor media charges, etc. And as we all know, the process of using manual slips have various disadvantages. It is prone to calculation error, damage in being misplaced, hard to make changes, and also there's a lot of chances of malpractices by the employees themselves. So to prevent the leakage and avert all these disadvantages, in August of 2019, miscellaneous collection system was introduced to digitize the entire process. And the revenue from this increased multifold from 13 crore per quarter to over 200 crore collected within a year. This was possible due to a combination of policy intervention, which eliminated manual process, and also curbing revenue leakage because of that. Apart from miscellaneous collection, all types of revenues and charges have seen very good growth. So last year, total revenues collected on the platform was more than 500 crores. And this has helped in improving financial sustainability of all ULBs tremendously. Next slide. To make it really easy to access municipal services, eGov and PMIDC recently partnered to launch mSeva WhatsApp chatbot just a few weeks ago. And now citizens can access a variety of services by chatting on WhatsApp. No need to download any app or go to ULB offices. Since its launch a little over a month ago, we are already seeing between 15 to 20% of complaints being now logged using this channel. eGov and PMIDC, we are both committed to expand the range of services accessible through this channel. And we hope that citizens in Punjab should soon be able to view and pay bills and access a lot more other services through WhatsApp as well. Next slide. The most unique thing about our engagement with Punjab was that right from the beginning, the state was very keen to build their own capacity to deploy and manage the platform. They assembled a fantastic team of 20 people consisting of project managers, solution architects, engineers, and we spent almost 1,100 hours in Bangalore and a lot more on online training to enable the team completely. And today, it is not the team is completely self-sufficient in managing the platform, and it is very satisfying to see the state take ownership of this. This is a marked departure, by the way, from the approach taken by most of the states. And a lot of credit goes to, again, Ajay Sharma and his team. Next slide. Apart from Punjab, few other states where Digit is being rolled out right now is in Uttarakhand, where the program is called Nagar Seva, and is currently live in about 60 of the 90 ULBs in the state. Odisha has recently launched a program called Sujog, where they are implementing Digit platform. And this is a critical part of the 5T initiative of the Odisha government, which is underway as we speak. Next slide. Chandigarh Smart City. This was a very significant milestone in our partnership journey. Chandigarh Smart City was the first city where a partner rolled out the Digit platform completely on their own. The program is very ambitious, where 31 modules are planned to go live, of which 11 are already live. And this is a great example of what Rohini just spoke about, Samaaj Sarkar Bazaar coming together, where a commercial player leveraged a public digital platform such as Digit and worked with the local government to deliver value to the society. Lastly, I will speak about eChhaoni. This is the most recent addition of our customers, is the Ministry of Defense, and they have chosen Digit platform and Bell as an implementation partner to provide online citizen services across all 62 cantonment boards of India. This entire program was conceived and set up during COVID period without anyone from eGov or the partner organization actually having to travel. Next slide. Now, working with our partners is a way of life for all of us at eGov. And we have a significant effort of our product team, engineering team, partnership team, goes in ensuring partners are successful in their state engagements. In the last couple of years, we must have enabled over 15 partners, conducting over 150 partner enablement sessions, and spending thousands of hours on partner training. We have now also have over 150 artifacts in form of videos and documents that are used by partner on a very regular basis. And we believe we are just getting started. Next slide. Another example of how great things can be achieved when Sarkar, Bazaar, and Samaaj comes together to deliver value during the need of the hour was during COVID lockdown. We all remember one of the important problems to solve at that time was how to ensure movement of essential goods and service providers seamlessly within and across the state borders. Working in collaboration with organizations mentioned on the slide, such as iSpirit, Amazon Web Services, NEGD, Ministry of Consumer Affairs, we very quickly designed and built a highly scalable bulk e-pass system on Digit, which was rolled out within days. This system was eventually used by over 8 states to register 50,000 essential service providers and issued 1 million daily passes. And this came in very handy during those periods. This is the power of open digital platform, working in collaboration with a broader ecosystem to build contextually relevant solution in a very short period of time. Next slide. And I would like to end with one last example of the point which Viraj mentioned about moving towards deepening our impact. We recently commissioned a study along with Omidyar Network and Apti Institute to explore impact of public digital platform and to better understand access to such platform for the last mile user, especially those who are not digitally native or may face other barriers to accessing government services digitally. Through field research conducted in multiple sites across Andhra Pradesh, Punjab, and Chennai, researchers from Aapti Institute set out to compare the experiences of people from well-connected, well-served, high internet use areas to peripheral, low internet use and very informal areas to get answers to questions like, are they able to access the services? And through what channels do we normally do so? And the results have highlighted that citizens access services from local government through multiple channels. They also show that there are multiple groups that still prefer to contact their ULBs in person or through phone calls rather than using digital channels. One important highlight which the study brought to our notice is the important role played by the intermediaries, be it NGOs, local entrepreneurs, or political actors in accessing government services. And we are committed to invest more time and resources in understanding this further and improving the platform and the solutions we build for them for amplifying their impact. Next slide. By the way, we have Sarayu, co-founder of Aapti, in an upcoming panel discussion. So it'll be very interesting to get her views as well on this. I would like to finally end by thanking everyone who has helped us in every step of this remarkable journey. And we hope to continue building out this ecosystem even broader as we take on more challenges in the coming years. We could not have done it without you. Thank you very much. At this point, I would also like to take a moment and thank our benefactors, Nilekani Philanthropy, Tata Trust, and Omidyar Network. Many thanks for your support. The link to download this full impact report will be available in the chat window right now. Please do download the report, and I hope you really enjoy reading it the way we enjoyed making it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. Back to you, Adi.
Thank you so much, Hiren. I think your presentation as well as Virad's and Rohini's address has set the stage very well for the panel discussion that will follow. The panel discussion on how citizens and communities can come together to shape their neighborhoods and cities. I'd now like to introduce the speakers and the chair of the panel. First, we have Dr. Sarayu Natarajan. Dr. Sarayu Natarajan is the founder of Aapti Institute, a research institution that aims to produce policy-relevant, actionable, and accessible knowledge on the interaction between people, societies, and technology. She has a PhD in political science from King's College London and an MPP from Columbia University, and is also an alumnus of the National Law School of India University. In this past year, Sarayu and her colleagues have been engaged in research that, among other things, helps eGov understand how citizens interact with local governments, where technology helps improve such interactions, and what gaps still remain despite it. Sarayu is also a member of eGov's Partner Council. Welcome, Sarayu. Next, we have Kuldeep Dantewadia. Kuldeep is the co-founder of Reap Benefit, a non-profit organization that focuses on volunteerism and what they call the power of the small. Reap Benefit works to engage youth in local, small-scale problem solving by crowdsourcing local data and collaboratively developing solutions that can be implemented in partnership with local institutions and governments. Kuldeep founded Reap Benefit when he was 23 and is passionate about involving youth in making change. For his work, he has been recognized as an MIT GSW Fellow, an Ashoka Fellow, an Unreasonable Fellow, and a Forbes 30 Under 30 entrepreneur. Welcome, Kuldeep. Next, we have Akilah Sivadas. Akilah Sivadas is the founding member of the Center for Advocacy and Research and currently serves as CFAR's Managing Trustee and Executive Director. A veteran social worker and activist, she has helped build CFAR into one of India's leading community-based rights organizations. Among CFA's current projects is the creation of user forums and single window counters in Pune, Jaipur, Kolkata, and Delhi. These initiatives support marginalized, poor, and underserved communities to register themselves for various social welfare missions for which they are eligible, to conduct community audits to ensure these benefits are received, and to organize initiatives to improve their communities. Welcome, Akilama. Next, we have Shruti. Shruti Parija has been leading the urban engagements under the data-driven governance portfolio at Tata Trusts since 2017. She was part of the team at Smart Cities Mission, which helped develop the Data Smart Cities strategy and the Data Maturity Assessment framework for 100 smart cities in 2019. She works closely with central and state planning entities to drive policymaking and the intersection of data, technology, and governance. Shruti holds an MA in social work from Tata Institute of Social Sciences, where she was a recipient of the Linnaeus Palm Fellowship. Shruti also holds an engineering degree in electronics and telecommunications. And lastly, but not the least, we have Srinivas Alavili, who will be chairing the panel today. Srinivas, or Shrinu, as he's dearly called by friends and colleagues, is the head of civic participation at Jawaharlal Nehru Center for Citizenship and Democracy, where he works on enhancing citizen participation in local governance. He has been active with the Citizens for Bangalore movement, organizing a number of campaigns. Previously, he served as the national head of communications for the Lok Satta party and incubated the India Against Corruption campaign in Bangalore. An engineer by training, Srinivas holds an MS in computer science from Utah State University. With this, I hand over to Srinivas for chairing the panel.
Thank you, Aditya. Can you hear me? May I request all the panelists to turn on their video, please?
Yes, sir.
Hey, thank you so much, Aditya, for that introduction. The topic for today is how citizens and communities are shaping our cities. I think we'll try to explore that. A very interesting group of us have been called in for this. I'm quite excited to know what everyone's going to say about this topic. And I'm also interested in having a more conversation, interaction between the panelists, and also any questions that come in from the audience. So let's explore how are things in 2020. For example, what are the latest trends in which citizens are now engaged with the government and public offices? And the cities have all of the major cities have seen a major demographic shift in the last few years, especially in the last decade. Now, what does that mean in terms of shaping the cities from the citizens? And identity of a citizen, how critical is this now in determining someone's citizenship? Who you are, where you are from, does that impact what you can do or what you will do as a citizen in this country, in the cities today? And then finally, we cannot not talk about the pandemic, right? We have to discuss how the pandemic has changed the mindset of people. For example, when so many people have seen all the people that are what were referred to as migrant workers going back to their states and villages, and what kind of impact did that have on the so-called middle class and the educated upper class? The fellow citizens of the same city are they looking at citizenship and their own fellow citizens differently? So we try to explore these topics. I'm very excited to have Akilah, Sarayu, Kuldeep, and Shruti on this. But I think we should give you a small break from all the talking and have you do something for all the audience that are here. So may I request Aditya to flash a little poll, and let's find out what our audience think about citizen participation. Do they really think that citizens and communities are shaping our cities, or is it just some wishful thinking that we have that they're doing that? So may I request all of you to give an honest answer. Let's look at the options in front of you, and then click the option that you would think is the most appropriate or what you would agree with. Let's look at where we stand, and maybe that will help our panelists also to respond to some of that. Okay, Aditya, I will wait for you to tell me when we close the poll and we had sufficient answers. Maybe you can flash the responses.
Almost 60% of the votes in. We can wait for another 10 seconds.
All right. Very, very quick audience. That means everyone in the audience is very much awake and watching us.
All right. So I'm ending the poll and I'll share the results.
Okay. Significantly, 18%. Yes, yes. Thank you. Very limited way, 56%. No, they're trying, but without results, 18%. Okay, not bad. Citizens are not interested in shaping cities. The cynical view, I would say, or maybe practical view, 6%. I don't think citizens should be shaping cities. All right. So I think we picked all the right options, guys. So we have responses on all of these. So I think the winner clearly is yes, but in a limited way. That seems to be the common understanding here. So let's see if that comes out in this conversation, right? That's what we are trying to find out from all of these wonderful folks we have here today. So let me just go to each of you. I'll ask the leading question, but I don't expect just you to be answering that. If somebody else wants to jump in and respond to that, please feel free to do so. Keep your responses brief so we can cover more ground in the time that's available to us. By the way, how much time is left for this panel, Aditya, at this point?
So, Tinu, we have another 45 minutes that we can
45
discussion.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks. Okay, Akilah, so let me come to you. You are a veteran in this. The amount of work that you've done here is phenomenal, and many of the people following this or participating in this are probably somewhat familiar with your work, and you have just gone through the entire experience of pandemic and what that means to the underprivileged sections of society, and what I'd like to hear from you is about what is the I heard you say that it's really sensitized the middle class, the pandemic, to the urban poor, the needs of the urban poor, the plight of the urban poor. So my question to you is that going to last? Is that something that has come and gone or going, or will it actually be around in a way that it actually has long-term implications? Will that mean that, say, the middle class and the urban poor will now somehow find ways to join together and then shape the city with common interests in mind? Do you think that kind of thing is now going to happen as a result of the learnings of the pandemic?
So I'd like to first preface it, Srini. All the points that have been made in the last three presentations by Viraj, Hiren, and Rohini, all of them hold true in many ways. Things are happening. Things are likely to happen. And there is ample opportunities to set things right. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, that there are no barriers, there are no challenges, and there are no impediments. On the question of the pandemic, yes, definitely it has, the image of the migrants walking back, I think has been like a shocker, and something that we all knew was, waiting to happen. If not on the pandemic, it will happen on some other provocation or some other context, but it was waiting to happen. Cities had become, and continue to become. There is a sort of an element of, what you call dehumanization. You can, when you go into some of the, interiors of the metropolis, you go into Manishwar, which is the neighboring sort of, thing of Delhi, the whole working class, hub there. You will see the kind of condition. We saw a bit of it during the Maruti strike. A lot of stuff came out, and it was very clear, the writing on the wall was very clear that, the workers were extremely alienated, highly stressed, complete lack of, any kind of, social security, any kind of support, alone, struggling. So this is not a saga that began with the pandemic. It was there. it just exploded or imploded, however you put it. And I think that has been a shocker. And they have seen their own people around on whom they're very dependent. You know, the housemaid is somebody who's they're very dependent on. You know, their whole, it's the route to happiness for them. If the minute her bell rings, then everything else, the whole world is looking rosy and manageable and doable for the day. So, and she was not around. She could not be around. So I think there was a sort of a stirring of the conscience. We have also heard anecdotally many people sort of saying that, no, I'm going to stop all my ongoing business. I'm going to get to the root of this problem and continue to work on the issue. I think that resolve that they're going to listen to people, they're going to hear people is there. I just make one point and I'll stop. What is, really challenging all of us, whether you do it from the digital space or you do it, face to face with the people, what is really challenging are two things. One, there is a precedence, and in any communication, they say what you hear first, what you see first, what you perceive and experience first. You can keep saying till cows come home that it's not that. It's not it. That was just, one-off. I'm actually a wonderful human being. I'm actually very tender and wonderful. Don't get demoralized. Don't get, no, it just gets stuck in the head. That is you. And you can keep saying it's not me. So in any communication, anything that precedes has a great impact. That's the baggage you have to remove to get in, to refill that baggage. So one is the precedence is not very good. Just to take the example of the housemaid, they won't allow them to use their toilet. 8 hours, 10 hours, do what you want to, but you can't use my toilet. And they'll be there in the seminars pledging on open defecation, stopping open urination, all of that. That kind of hypocrisy, the poor see in us, Srini, let's all admit. So that's the very simple baggage, but it leaves a lot of, they're not capable of rancor. They don't have rancor. The poor don't have rancor. They are emotionally very mature, but there is a sense of hurt, which is equally bad. So one is that baggage. The second is, just now, Viraj and, Hiren were sort of, praising all the sort of duty bearers, the officials, the leaders, the government, so to speak. No doubt. There are wonderful champions there. There are great people there. They'll tell you in private how, powerless they are. We went once to the Prime Minister, Manmohan Singh, and he said, I'm sorry, I can't do anything very much about this. You'll have to take it to the streets to get it resolved. So systems are in their own way trapped and powerless. They've got caught into a little maze themselves and they don't know how to get out of that maze. So it's not about intentions, very good. Some amount of sensitivity growing, some amount of, reaching out happening, some amount of transformation actually getting ignited. All of that is happening. And yet there are millions of people who are left out of, the most basic and leading a life of extreme indignity, and more so during the pandemic. It will take more than just tut-tutting, just, expressing empathy. We'll have to do something much more, hands-on to, demonstrate that we are changing, and the city dynamics is like a circuit. You trip any part of the circuit and everything will collapse. It will be a, outage. Okay. So let's realize that.
Yes, we are still a work in progress while we make a lot of progress in many aspects. Saryu, I want you to jump into this since you worked on the last mile. Is this what you're also seeing? There is a increased sensitivity, and therefore can we expect to see some, real lasting partnership between the so-called middle class, and I'm using these words loosely, and apologies if somebody don't agree with them, but poor, right? Do you see that the COVID-induced, it's probably awakened the guilt that most of us carry around the urban poor even before COVID, but it has really surfaced it, and now you are sensitized. So do you see that having any practical impact on how these communities are now going to perhaps partner in demanding better services from the urban governments or government in general? Is that something that you see?
Right. I think it's hard to say, that there's a sudden shift in the trajectory, but as Akilah alluded to it, and I think all of the other speakers, even over the course of the last two presentations over the last 2 days, have sort of brought up what this has done is highlight the interdependency of different kinds of communities in an urban area. So to think that now you can live an isolated existence in an urban space is something that's not possible. So in a strange, almost paradoxical way, what the pandemic has done is brought to the forefront how much interdependencies there are within the urban space. So that's the first part. But on this question of is it likely to change shape or is it likely to be more or less, I think that to my mind is a fairly complicated question, and therefore the answer also probably will be, it's not that there hasn't been citizen activism in the past, right? It's not that communities, whether the urban poor or anybody else, has not accessed channels and means available, to make claims of the state in the way that they choose. So it's not like it hasn't happened. And there's a rich sort of, from the academic perspective, a rich writing, rich literature that talks about this politics between elections. So it's not like the elections are the only way. But having said that, what has happened now and what the pandemic has made even more apparent is this availability of technology. Right. But the assumption that we always make, and technology has made it very easy. I think somebody said distribute the capacity to solve, even at the citizen level, not just at the ecosystem level. There is much more of a capacity to take ownership of problems and then solve it at a community level and at a much broader level as well. But what has happened is that we've assumed that the costs for participation and the fears around participation have entirely disappeared, right? And which is not the case. What has happened is that quite likely, and this is some of what our research is showing as well, is that the opportunity costs of going out and taking an action have been replaced by the kind of difficulty in understanding or making sense of technology. There's a certain lack of visibility. There's a lack of community feeling. There's also the fear that there's a hyper visibility to the state, which might not always be advantageous. So overcoming these costs, and for social organizations, and I think there was a question in the chat as well that alluded to this, for social organizations to work more closely together to build these capacities, and I use capacities loosely, but to build these capacities around working with technology in being more active citizens, I think that's the need of the hour. And that's the trajectory which we should not just, it's not a question of foreseeing it, but it's a question that we should, as community organizations, as people working in this space, work actively towards building. And I'll pause there.
Something you said there about politics between elections, right? This is something that I would like to double click on if you are willing to explore that. So is it true that people are now, and especially people in the urban areas are now, willing to engage in between elections as opposed to, once every 5 years, which itself is highly questionable because the voting percentage in urban elections is quite low, even compared to the parliament and assembly elections, which may indicate a low level of interest in what the third tier of government, the local government does, or a complete lack of, interest in understanding the third tier, or, not caring enough about outcomes that might come out of the local government. So why do I waste my time? That's one theory. And another theory, which I must point out, is also the obvious flaws in the voter list that create an inflated voter list. So the percentage of actual votes might be actually more than what is reported by the election commission and so on. Keeping that as a disclaimer, do you see a trend of people, participating, loosely using that word, in between elections? Are they willing to engage with, say, politicians? Once they know that this is the particular elected representative, and I'm going to now, go to this her or him and work with these people. And in the same breath, are these elected representatives also, are they in a position to truly represent? Because if you take a councillor in Bengaluru, he or she will represent 70, 80,000 people, probably got votes about 5,000 to 10,000 votes. That's a winning vote. So therefore, maybe 10%, 20% of the entire ward has voted for her or him. But now her job is to represent the entire ward. So what do you think about these two things? And I invite others to come in too, if you have a point to talk about.
Right. I would love to hear everybody's views on this, and therefore I'll keep my answers brief. On the second question on this representativeness, you highlight a very complex problem in political science more broadly. Even if you think about the national government, and this has been a trend that we've been observing, the governing party often gets way less than the majority. So even now, I think it's about 30% at the central level, and it's similar across states, with the exception, with a few exceptions here and there when there's a landslide victory. So it's a complicated problem in politics, but the idea is that whoever is elected will fairly take up the cause and the voices of whoever they represent. But the reality is more complex than that, because there's vote banks that you need to cater to. There is the need for patronage and building sort of relationships with those that will continue to vote for you, and you sort of get into this reward sort of punishment system, which it's fairly complicated. So I mean, there's that, but it's a deep problem. I don't know the answer to this. On the other, on the politics between election, it's hard to say that there's more willingness or more willingness to participate. There's definitely more awareness, and part of this has been the significant efforts of organizations, including like Janagraha, that have worked at the civic level in bringing about awareness on who the elected leadership is, on the local committees. Even the structure of urban governance is such a mystery to many that that work has been done. The other is also there are many more channels available now. So you can go out and, in addition to the traditional repertoire, so the traditional channels by which you could access the government, you also have many more available. You can talk on social media, you can write letters with much more ease. So the barriers to participation in some way have been further reduced. The ways in which, and again, this goes back to what I said earlier, the ways in which this is fruitfully used to drive change at the urban level, that's something that many actors, Samaaj, Sarkar, Bazaar, need to come together to do more meaningfully.
Thanks, Saryu. Okay, let's now go East Coast. I think, Shruti, you're joining us from Cuttack. Am I right? In Odisha?
Yes, Srinivas. Hi.
I was just there 2 days ago. Beautiful city, beautiful place. And, Shruti, I want you to tell us a bit about your work in terms of, enabling citizens using digital mediums and platforms that we have. So you can connect to the cities, better, without the barriers that Saryu was talking about.
Right.
What are these platforms doing? What are the kind of things that you've been doing? And, and how big is the exclusion problem, right? Any time you bring up digital, the second word has to be exclusion, right? Obviously, it has to be something that we should understand. And so therefore, I'd like you to talk about the digital platforms as well as the severity of the exclusion problem and what it is that people are doing, including yourselves and others that are trying to use digital mediums. Would you like to talk about this?
Sure. Thank you, Srinivas. I think I completely echo Sarayu's sentiments when she talks about the whole issue of exclusion with respect to digital platforms. We really saw this problem get amplified during the pandemic situation. As a citizen, as a migrant laborer, as one who's not really exposed to anything remotely digital, one is expected to apply for inter-district, interstate travel passes on technical portals, apply for employment in case of job losses on such portals. Even let the city government know that, say you have COVID symptoms or have been tested positive and are in need of medical attention, you have to visit such portal. If you analyze this further, you see that exclusion has sort of been built in as a part of the design of such portals. We take it for granted that the processes we design will by default be accessible to everyone. In my opinion, if at the design stage, you are able to really factor in engagement and participation of communities, regardless of income levels, regardless of digital literacy, or for that matter, access, perhaps even explore certain, blended or phygital mediums for engaging with citizens, we'll do a far better job of ensuring that the policy making that we do reaches a much more inclusive base of people.
Yeah. And what does the data tell you in terms of usage of digital medium? Do you have any numbers that you can share with? How many people do you think can realistically use digital mediums? Do you have any information in that dimension?
Yes, let me actually talk about a few experiences here, Srinivas. I think we've all used digital platforms while connecting to our urban local bodies. And there are several such platforms, including the Digit platform by e-governments, which is used for citizen-centric service delivery. Let me talk about a specific digital medium in cities which has seen a rather significant surge in civic participation in the last couple of years. So hackathons, if some of you are familiar with the concept as a medium, has gained a lot of popularity, especially after the open data program in India took off. While hackathons have, traditionally been a very closed door sort of an event anchored by a technical community, today we see that the forum is really opening up to civic problem solving and, solutioning for the larger social good. Multiple city governments have put out their data freely and willingly on open data portals. And that gives, citizens like you and me the opportunity to enable problem solving within the government structure by participating in events. So if we have the time, let me talk a little bit about what are hackathons, what is the process, and maybe cite an example or two.
Maybe a hackathon that you really thought was actually pragmatic and actually made a difference to the city governance. Is there a hackathon like that comes to your mind? Maybe you can take 30 seconds to describe that and come back to it later.
Sure, definitely. So let me talk about a specific hackathon that as a part of Tata Trusts we did with Pune Municipal Corporation. So the education department of Pune, they made available open data sets for about 1,200 plus schools on the open data portal. This had data related to school enrollment, related to the medium of instruction, the management type, category, and so on. So typically hackathons are meant to address a large problem which, a significant number of citizens in a city are facing. So the problem statement here was that in a regular scenario, a parent who would be seeking school admission for their wards, they would typically rely on their friends, their neighbors to get that information. What we wanted developers to come up with a solution was it would be extremely useful if a tool would be provided to parents so that they can locate schools in their neighborhood. They would also get information on facilities, on infrastructure, on the student-teacher ratio, the performance, safety aspects on a particular consolidated, platform. We had a very positive experience in running this hackathon with a lot of enthusiastic, contribution from civic communities like DataMeet. We had engineering colleges partner with us, industry partners stepped in to offer their technical guidance and mentorship. We also had NGOs and community-based organizations freely share their data around other civic issues. And as a result of which, a fair amount of problem solving took place, which is now being used by the corporation. So they are an excellent medium to really, bridge this whole issue of connection or belongingness that citizens have with urban local bodies and do it in a very participatory and meaningful manner.
So something changed in the schools as a result of it? What was the actual outcome for the parents or the students?
For the parents, Srinivas, for them to get transparent information in a consolidated region, as opposed to looking at a sort of an uninformed way of decision making when they were selecting schools for enrollment of their children.
So instead of falling for the advertisements of the schools, now they have a more insight into what exactly the schools are doing. And okay, wonderful. Okay, so let me go to our youth icon here, Kuldeep. Hope you're doing well, Kuldeep. A long time. Recently I saw that REAP Benefit has celebrated the 7th anniversary, and I think Aditya was talking about how you started it at a very young age, and all of us are inspired by that. But now you are the big brother. You've been around many of these kids, if I may call so, with no disrespect whatsoever. So now 7 years after that initial days of REAP Benefit, and your fundamental belief that if you catch them young and train them or make them aware, and you will end up with some citizens, a large pool of citizens that are now going to be active, and not only they are going to take care of themselves, but they will act as champions of citizenship to those around them, right? I do see some examples around me from the alumnus of REAP Benefit, but I want you to talk about it. What has been your understanding of what has happened in all these years? Maybe you can take a minute for those of us in the participants that are not aware of how REAP Benefit works, introduce it quickly. But I'm more interested personally to know about when you REAP Benefit onboards a young student, 13, 14, 15 years old, and does whatever programs you do, making those Solve Ninja and many of the programs, amazing things that I myself have been part of on few occasions. What happens to them after they go to college and they get out of college and get into the mainstream adult boring life? Do they still continue to be excited about these civic challenges? Or they say that was good, Kuldeep, and disconnect with this whole process? I'm very curious to know about this.
Thanks a lot, Srinivas. So just for the audience, REAP Benefit is an organization which works with young people in solving local neighborhood issues. So how do we develop a civic muscle in young people to actually solve the issues? Like Rohini spoke about the supply side of things. How can they solve issues which they see, feel, experience every day in their neighborhood? So, I mean, this is a question I get asked very often, which is, first of all, do young people want to do something like this? And B, does it sustain? And while Rohini was speaking, she said that, citizen problem solving is not a spectator sport. And when something is not a spectator sport and you have to participate, you need a different kind of muscle to participate in it. And the muscle can only be built by taking actions. The more actions you take, the continuity of your actions, that's when the muscle gets built. And Srinivas, what our learning has been is that if you look at young people from a tokenistic point of view, as consumers of information, as a large block which has to be made aware of things, I think there is enough research in the world which says that that does not have significant impact. We know climate change is real, but our actions don't demonstrate that. But on the contrary, if you don't look at young people as consumers of information, but as distributors of solutions, if you look at young people as people who have agency, and if they're given that agency, they can solve real issues in their neighborhood, you actually see magic happening. Now, you will of course find a lot of young people. What we have seen in our 7 years is that you'll find some of them dropping off this ladder. But what is very interesting is that even if they drop off the ladder, this muscle was activated or built at some point of time. So it is easier to get those people back into the mainstream if a large community is there, rather than just keeping them aside and hoping that when they turn 30, 40, or as you said, when they get into the boring adult life, they have nothing to do. So long story short, I think the two big learnings we have had is, one, you build a community of like-minded people, and this community then starts nudging people. That is one. And secondly, you make the entire experience action-oriented so that a young person believes that they have agency to solve. So you don't look at it as a one-time project or downloading them with a lot of information, but you make it real. And now we are seeing network effects happen, Srinivas. So we have young people in Bangalore inspiring and working with young people in Punjab, Masuri, Odisha, Bihar. And that's happening because the community is there. So that's been our learning. Srinivas, you're on mute.
Okay. All right. Yeah, that's nice to hear, Kuldeep. I think that's it resonates with me a lot. I think once you are active, you are active. It will take a lot of effort to take you away from it. It's addictive to be participating in governance. I'm myself an example of that, and it's very difficult to stay away when you see things happening and you had some view into this. So there is another aspect that I think I thought that will be interesting for us to discuss, and this is for everyone. But Akilah, you could start perhaps. We had this old, I wouldn't say old, but we had this tradition of resident welfare associations, right? The group of citizens, usually senior citizens, retired persons in a particular community layout, usually a gentrified layout with a colony and a park and things like that, where people form into an association and they represent their issues to the local councillor or political class or the workers of the political party and so on. So that is something that many Indian cities have. They might call it differently in different cities, but let's just call them RWAs, or Resident Welfare Associations. But having been part of many citizen movements in Bengaluru myself, like the steel flyover or Chikubuku Beku, which is a suburban train, and the bus buggy and various others, and ward committees, as we went forward in that particular tone of doing activism or organizing and mobilizing, I noticed that there is more and more. Whitefield Rising, for example, is almost 9-10 years old. There are more and more groups with a suffix called Rising. You have KR Puram Rising, we have Hennur Rising, we have Baswangudi Rising, we have all kinds of things right here in Bengaluru, and many other, Save RA in Mumbai for the RA forestries. So this difference I see is that from the earlier model of registered bodies with office bearers, the president, secretary, treasurer, they have meetings, they have resolutions and so on, to a more informal networks of people that come together and lobby and gather together and find all kinds of ways of mobilizing other like-minded citizens to fight towards maybe one point issue. It's not about the area itself, but it could be about RA. It could be about one flyover, but that may trigger other things in public transport, like we've experienced in Bangalore, because once you're in, you're in. So do you see that this kind of shift happening from the style of associations of people working for civic issues towards movements that come together in large numbers and raise up, and then when the issue is resolved or one way or other, they go away? Do you see a trend like this picking up in various cities of India? And while I start with Akilah, I'd really like to know from others too, Sarayu and Kuldeep as well. Go ahead, Akilah. Akilah, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm now. Okay. Yes, no, I agree with you. We saw a lot of it in the last few years, much more crystallized, and on everything from a lake to a flyover to different issues. Animal rights activists are very, very powerful in many contexts. They pick up issues, and they have their own forms of protest and own forms of mobilizing. However, I think this has to be also put into the context of the kind of local self-government or the kind of devolution that is happening in terms of city governments. I think in the absence of that, just to look at this kind of activism, very opportunistic, sometimes very inspiring. You yourself have been part of some of it, but doesn't leave enough of a footprint in terms of what is called the trajectory of change in terms of citizen engagement. The kind of thing that we have seen in the rural context it's taken years, but it has got evolved. And across programs, across schemes, across, issues, there has been a strong, when the minute you look at environment and you think of the Chipko movement, you have actually a legacy of that kind. There are associations of that kind. I think that the city, the context is slightly different. And in the city, the ability to what you call bring about social cohesion. You create just an interest group of that kind and say, we are speaking for the middle class, we are speaking for the educated, we are now taking on our responsibility as, as activists, as, citizens. Yes, it has its value and, it's a very good trigger to get started, but it must be a trigger. It must be an area of inquiry. What is it that I'm not doing? Where are my responsibilities? Where are my sort of ethical concerns? All of that needs to get raised along with this. And I think in this context, 2 points I'd like to mention, Srini. In terms of a lot of the movements are also now reaching out. It's not like the middle class is not reaching out. It understands, especially on young people, there is a lot of concern. You would find even otherwise, even very informally, and at very personal and at a very micro level, there are concerns when children are not in school. People will actually tap and say, "Aap school kyun nahi gaye hain? Why are you hanging around here?" So all of that is there. But how do you structure it into a change, into creating what is called a caring city, into creating what is called a compassionate city? We are right now in the mercury is dropping in Delhi. We're already wondering whether all of them are getting to the night shelter or not. People are actually roaming around to see whether, there are still people being left out. There are night patrols happening and monitoring happening just to check, because you can't just tuck yourself away and think that, all is well, at least for the moment, all is well. So I think all of that requires a different kind of, a governance. It requires a governance platform. It requires far more sort of, transparency. I completely agree with Kuldeep that once they get into the whole, in the whole dynamics of change, you can never roll back. They become agents of change. They, get stimulated. So they'll be questioning all the time. There will be constant attempt to, reach out, to network, to build platforms, to actually create another saga. But does that impact what are called structures and systems that are so entrenched, that forces you back on every issue, forces you back? We haven't solved a simple problem like life skill education for young people. It is still eluding them. We had a complete sort of backlash on it in the last decade. And that backlash was so powerful, we have not been able to get up that animal or get up that entity or that structure or that knowledge. The young people are absolutely struggling to get advice, help, mentoring on all these issues, very existential issues. So I think we really need to look at not these little sparks, but a more structured process of change. And I think the inspiration there, Srini, comes from the poor. They have actually, everywhere, they have taken charge of the city. Let's for a while, at least as long as the pandemic and other pandemics, challenge us, let us really look at them for solutions. Let's look at them for leadership. Let us look at them for their insight and wisdom. And let's give them a chance to speak up and lead the middle class, because they know a lot. They know how the city was built. They actually built the city. They know it. They know the dangers
I must mention at this
and the
point,
pitfalls.
I must mention, Akilah made me think about what I just experienced. Just the last 72 hours, 96 hours, I was in Odisha. I went to several small towns around the capital city, capital A region. And I was working with the slums in Odisha, and they have what's called the Slum Dweller Association, the SDA.
Yes.
And I walked into many such meetings. 100% women. And the Slum Dweller Associations are supposed to have 50% women, but they actually have 100% women. And not only they are associations meant to sit around and discuss, but they're implementation partners. You want to make something happen in the slum, the government is now asking them, you do it yourself. You need a road, you lay the road yourself. And they're coming forward to do such things. And when I was in Bangalore and listening into all these things and meetings and slideware and all that, I had my own skepticism and I was thinking, does this really work? But now I am a reformed person. I just came back and then now I have seen this in action. They are very much involved and they understand governance. They understand governance.
We'd like to invite you in Bangalore, where you'll see 6 primary health centers entirely run by communities. And these cater to a lakh population each PHC. So all of this is happening. It's just not getting structured into the formal governance of the city.
So that's the other thing. That's the other thing that I would like to bring in as we are running short of time. The formal mechanism, Sarayu. Is it important? How important is a formal institutionalized mechanism for actual citizens' participation in the ward level governance? We call it ward committees in Bengaluru. In Mumbai, they have ward committees with our citizens. In Kerala, they have the people plan. How important is a formal institutionalized mechanism within our urban local governance so that you no longer have to fight, but you actually have a forum where you can go in and do this? In Odisha, that is Slum Dweller Association. In Bengaluru, it is ward committees. But what is it really across India, and what does your work say about this?
Right. So, I mean, it's, yes, absolutely formal institutions and sort of institutionalization in some ways is absolutely critical for any of this to work. For there to be a more robust governance, you need to have institution. And as Akilah pointed out, a lot of the efforts have been in a certain way siloed, have been in sort of different levels, and there's not that institutional and lasting capacity that's built in these mechanisms. But having said that, both formal and informal institutions, and I'm hesitant to say set aside all informal institutions because they are all bad, because they do bring the great strength of being able to account for dynamics very quickly. Formal institutions, as systems and processes get more entrenched, may end up coding or encoding exclusionary practices. So one has to be careful in thinking through this and not being from the frame that all informal mechanisms and all informal engagement must be excluded, because in a certain way that goes to the domain of eroding politics from this interaction in governance entirely. So I would be wary of that, and also paying attention to the political economy. So thinking about, for example, is there capture of certain, there's a whole lot of writing about, the RWAs being elite institutions in certain contexts, right? And that's a problem. And while RWAs are a great mechanism to formalize potentially, being careful about representativeness, being careful about, having this space to renegotiate these structures as you go along and accommodate changing needs, that's very critical too. So I think, paying it, and similarly, informal institutions do come with their own baggage as well. Not to go into that at this moment, but, being aware of that, like the competing sort of problems with different kinds of approaches is very critical right up front.
Kuldeep, would you like to add anything to this conversation?
Not much, Srinivas. I think I agree with what Akilah said, that these are good sparks to have. But I think the real spark which can catch fire and really bring disruptive change is when we involve people from underserved communities. I think most of these movements which we look at in cities have a certain strata coming. And I can just share our own experience. 60% of the audience we work are young people from underserved communities. And the rate of change and the rate of resilience, or the civic muscle we talk, there is way higher. These young people are actually talking about contesting for corporator elections and councillor elections and getting their hands dirty. Whereas when you talk about the served community, they can give you a long lecture on why politics is dirty and what they can do from the fence, and be a spectator. So my only point is that I am actually coming to this point of conviction that politicians just mirror us as citizens. So they are a reflection of who we really are at a larger level. And if the spark has to catch a fire, it needs to have people from underserved communities who have a better resilience and better ways of solving these problems and creating these decentralized models rather than, having people from certain areas in a city and hoping that change is coming from there. That's and a ward committee in Bangalore will be very successful when the owner of the house and the driver or the maid of the house are both attending that ward committee and talking about issues. I think that's what we should
and
do.
that's how they are designed. That's how they are designed, and that's the most inclusive forum that we have. And speaking of digital literacy, and Aditya will go into Q&A right after this. If you could be ready with the questions. What I want to know from all of you is this, something that bothers me a lot, and in fact, I've started doing something about it at Janagh. It's called city politics. Is we keep talking about digital literacy, empowerment, all these things. But where I come from, I think there is a problem with political literacy. Many of the citizens, however educated or high-paid salaries or otherwise, considered to be, waxing eloquent about rights of citizens and in collectivism, as Rohini referred to in her keynote address, are simply unaware of the role of an MP, role of an MLA, a corporator. Who is my corporator? What scope of work does the corporator have? Where does my water come from? And why is it that the agency that supplies water does not have an elected representative, whereas the garbage is managed by an elected representative? In Bengaluru, we recently have a phenomena of now they want to start a new corporation for garbage management, while many of us have been fighting for merging these corporations and bringing them under the BBMP. But there are certain other sections of people that think that. So for me, this conveys a lack of political literacy in the adult citizens of Bengaluru, or perhaps true in many other cities. So is this really, is my feeling true? And therefore people are also afraid of or reluctant to have a mutual understanding or relationship with the local politicians. In city politics, I'm trying to bring the councillors and citizens to talk to each other. And a common reaction from the citizens is that I never knew corporators can talk like this. I never knew they know so much information. I didn't know that they actually can quote Constitution Section 243W in a panel discussion on Zoom. Right? People have this opinion about politicians, especially local politicians, that I think it's coming in the way of productive engagement. Do you guys see this problem? Is this something, should we take Kuldeep's REAP benefit curriculum and introduce into the national education policy or something? What should be the way forward in this? Since you are smiling, Saryu, I'll ask you first.
No, I mean, I don't disagree on either count. I mean, there is a breakdown in thinking about political literacy, particularly for elites, and it's the paradox of many communities. Nor do I disagree with the idea that the work that Kuldeep does through REAP benefit should be made more widely accessible to a wider range of people. So that's true. But just to get onto the point of political literacy, I mean, I think that it's. And Akilah kind of alluded to this before as well. It's not like there isn't to say that political literacy is entirely absent is a bit of a stretch, mainly because it makes the problem lie at the community level and not at the way in which the system functions. There is a challenge because political literacy is, you end up using the repertoire that you have available to you that you're least afraid to use, right? So if you're scared of oppression from the system, you would choose not to do a certain set of things. If you don't have the emotional, the economic, the psychological bandwidth to take a certain set of actions, you will not take those actions, right? So it's not so much a question of political literacy as it is a question of thinking about the way in which the system oppresses, and it oppresses certain marginalized communities much more. So political literacy is like, it's a two-way thing. It has to come from, it's not about addressing a lacunae in the citizen. Like I like the way Kuldeep frames it, like it's about building the agency to take action. And that's really where, social organizations need to come together with technology, because technology can do a whole lot to unlock that agency, right? But having said that, how do you really do it at an institution, in an institutionalized way, at scale, for a large number of people, is what you need to be talking about.
And not to mix up political literacy with electoral. Let's not mix it up.
Correct.
There
Correct.
are many alternative
That's
paradigms.
Right. That's right. Yeah. Okay. So we have a couple of questions. We have lots of questions, I believe, but Aditya is kind enough to filter some and put some in the chat window for me. So I'm going to throw it open to the question. So how do you get local politicians or administrators to care about the issues or needs of informal area? They are as likely to dismiss them as illegal. Any examples where this has been managed well? So this is a question. Who would like to take this?
I'd like to take it. I think they're very scared of the poor. They're also very scared of the slum because so many things are, unresolved, and they can get into a powwow with the community. So I think the only way to resolve it is very strong mediation, very, very essential, so that both sides understand each other's issue. It's not that, it's not about us versus them, because that won't help. So I think a strong mediation, and that's where civil society organizations, and of course with technology thrown in, definitely, it's not only an aid, it can become a tool, and a very catalytic tool. You bring about, it's like brokering. You have to broker the relationship.
Okay.
On both sides.
Fair enough. Okay. And that's where the role of CSOs and other organizations comes into picture. I think that's very important. It's already happening.
And our experiment with single window has been singularly, useful, because it acts like shall we say, a parallel bureaucracy.
Okay, there's a question here from anonymous attendee. What do intermediaries actually do to enable citizens? What are the incentives in doing so? Sari, would you like to take that?
Right. Happy to take it. This is the subject of the research that we did that Hiren mentioned in the course of his presentation, the work in the last mile. This is also my doctoral work, so please stop me if I go overboard. But I think intermediaries is a broad term used to refer to a range of actors who work at the community level, who enable citizens to engage with the state, and that's really it. And to think about intermediaries as one block who come in with the same set of interests in all cases is a bit difficult. So basically there are different kinds, different intermediaries coming for different reasons. You could have local political actors who are interested in, the next election, and they're working by doing local constituency surveys in order to optimize for the next election. There could be civil society organizations in certain areas that are working on an agenda, but end up very often, we've learned, playing a wider role than actually the focus area that they are supposed to work on. So if an organization is doing health, community health, the organization very often ends up doing a whole range of other things as well at the community level, just because there's an absence of anybody else. So intermediary is just anybody who helps citizens reach the state, live better lives, get access to more in that sense. And the incentives are also therefore very varying and very complicated, and not all universally good or bad. So I'll stop there.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Divya Nag is asking, and I think Gautam, you should take this. Divya is saying that Divya is appreciating what Rohini said about all of us being a citizen first. However, in the recent years, citizen engagement seems to have reduced in many contexts and due to several reasons. In your view, what are the three key ways that CSOs can reactivate civic engagement around issues of transparency, accountability? Using digital platforms is one way, of course, but what about others? Gautam?
So Srini, I'm going to defer this question to the panel. I think there are far more experienced and competent people on the panel, and I'd love to hear what they have to say.
Can we redirect this to Shruti, actually? We feel like Tata Trust has worked with a number of different groups, and so we'd love to hear from Shruti as well.
Thanks, Amir. Yes, so actually we spoke about the role of digital platforms in reactivating civic engagement. I think one of the points that I was thinking through when we were talking about, when all the panelists were referring to the discussion around lower civic participation in the urban domains, I realized that the whole aspect of decentralization since it's been so high on the rural governance side, we see a lot more participation, not only from citizens, but also from civil society organizations. Whereas on the urban side, because the whole devolution and decentralization conversation has taken a backseat despite so many initiatives and programmatic interventions by CSOs, we see that citizens' participation is fairly low. So I'd like to leave you with that thought that perhaps one could think about decentralization in a better way.
Okay. Okay, there is another question. I actually don't quite understand. Gautam, you would like to comment now? You also want to say something to this?
No, Srini, I'm good. Thank you.
All right. So the question is about citizens. I mean, I think you can interpret it in a way that you would like. Citizens not only need to engage with politicians, but they're also powerful non-state actors in a city like Bangalore. I would like to know who these people are. But anyway, how do you think citizens can face these strong, powerful actors? Does that question make sense to any of you? And you would like to answer that?
Would it be possible to bunch up? Sorry. Sorry,
repeat the
Akilah.
question. No, just repeat the question.
The question is that it's not just politicians, but they're non-state actors that are powerful in cities. Yeah. Do you think citizens can face these powerful actors? I think probably they mean political workers or local, musclemen, things like that. Or I'm not quite sure, but I think it's an interesting question.
Would it be possible to add up a couple of questions as well, and maybe we could take 2 or 3 together if that makes sense?
All right, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. Yeah. Okay, so is it not, the next question is probably Kuldeep's question for Kuldeep. Is it not high time for urban governments to start thinking about environment issues that pose a big threat to the upcoming generations? Are there any groups that are already working on these? This is the other question. Yeah, Let me try to find one more. Okay. You want to go ahead and answer? Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer, and I am increasingly beginning to understand that they're linked. Civic issues and environment issues to a great extent. Is solid waste an environment issue or a civic issue? Air quality. I think the conversation is going up. The pressure is much more. I think a lot of people don't discuss, but according to me, the biggest environment/civic issue which we will face in a decade or so will be urban flooding. We are already listening and talking about that. So I think, should we focus on that? I mean to say, it's a no-brainer. Yes, we have to focus on that. The question is, how do we bring it on their agenda? And how do we smartly bring it on their agenda? And very quickly, Shni, to Dianak's question, how do we reactivate citizen engagement? I think in cities, there is this fascination of creating high-level platforms and hoping that somebody would come out there and roll up their sleeves and start solving problems. I think as civil society organizations, we should start becoming a participating member in the platform rather than the platform itself, because action has a multiplier effect, or else we'll again start creating elite structure wherein people will tell others what has to be done, but nobody is actually going out and doing anything. So the simple way to reactivate, like when you play any sport, is you start playing the sport with the audience you're working with, and hopefully after a point it starts creating network effects.
Yeah, if I also may add my own personal experience with that, I don't think you can reactivate or activate civic engagement. I just don't see that paradigm. I mean, people can build platforms and they can do grievance redressals and so many things. Janagraha itself does a lot of civic tech, and so does EGAV and many other wonderful players that are really changing the way governance is done in India. But as far as civic engagement is concerned, it has to come from the people to solve a particular issue, thorny thing that is bothering them. If there's enough people that are upset about something, angry about something, and want to see something to change for the better, now that's activation of civic engagement. If you say, come, let's activate other citizens so then we can go engage with the government, that will only go a certain distance. But if you have a particular pain point or you want to see a positive change with respect to the bus or maybe how the garbage management is happening, whatever that particular issue might be. If the demand is articulated in a way that people are inspired enough to get off their chairs and get into the action mode, now you are engaging. Now that is something that is just like the reap benefit students, is once you start working on one particular aspect with other citizens, you're going to continue working on something else or with some other people. And the number of people that work on these things in a city of 1.2 crore, I often say this, hardly a few hundred people are interested in this and are actually working on it. A lot of people are talking about it, but a very few hundred people are actually doing things. So once you get into this ecosystem, it's very easy to find who these people are. They're not hiding because they want you. They want to work with more and more people like you and I. So therefore, they are advertising themselves, for the lack of better word. So once you start working on a particular issue like a lake revival, garbage management, whatever that attracts your attention, gathering people, organizing, mobilizing, then now you are in that ecosystem of participation. And there's no looking back. You're only going to go bigger and bigger and wider because you will come across other people that are interested in these two things. So I think that's how I would suggest that anyone who is looking to create citizen participation is, don't look for citizens, look for action, action points, the pain point. Now citizens will come because if you are pained by it, you can be sure that at least 10 others are pained by it. Now it's your challenge to convince them to work with you and you to work with them to make something happen in that. So if you take this route, in a very short time, you will multiply the number of people that are working on this thing. So that has been my experience in the last 4 years. I think we are overshooting the time. Was there any question that wasn't been answered? Aditya, would you like to come in, or should we just run the final poll before we hand over to Gautam?
Thank you, Shrinu. What we'll do is we'll gather all the questions that have been asked in the chat window, and we will also respond them together as an Excel sheet or something. So we have some idea on that. Thank you so much, Shrinu, and all the panelists. What we can do is run this quick poll. Again, one quick question. And I'll
10
do
seconds, 10 seconds only, please.
Absolutely, yeah. So everyone, if you can just spend 10 seconds.
Okay, 10 seconds done, Aditya.
Yeah. Yes, I'm sharing the results. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So youth it is then. Very closely followed by citizen movements and women. All right. And urban force. I think very nice to see this. Very nice to see this. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And I thank all the panelists for their patience and their active participation. Thank you, Igor, for setting this up and calling us. Over to you, Gautam.
Thank you all for such a wonderful panel. When we put this panel together, we were not sure if it would make sense for a lot of the audience today, but all of you have taken this home well and you've delivered the right messages, and we've got a lot of food for thought, both as EGOV and as the wider audience. So I just want to take a few moments to highlight some of the topics that jumped up, right? And importance of Samaaj in co-creating governance. And it's important for us to realize is that we are not just active, we are not just recipients of governance, but we are also participants. And so it needs to be an active part in our side to take part in that process. And we can't be like sitting back and demanding better governance without doing what it takes to do get there. The second thing that really stood out to me was across a lot of you, we need to look for leadership where we don't think of looking for it. And whether that is youth, whether that is urban poor, whether it's women, because traditionally speaking, these are the change makers. And the rest of the people we traditionally consider as leaders are only one of the types of leaderships that are possible. So how can we enable a more diverse form of leadership? And this is something that we promise we'll think more deeply about and hopefully work with some of you to solve these issues. The third thing is that collectively we decide what's important. And I think both Kuldeep and Rohini said this well. Governance is about participation. So we cannot spectate. If we want the country and the kind of society we want for our children, then we need to step up and take action. And finally, this is from eGov's side. We promise we will get better at this. And let's all join hands together to build a tidal wave of change making. We'll struggle through this, but we'll do it together and we'll get there. Thank you all.
Thank you everyone for joining us in these 3 days. We have had some very exciting conversations. And as Gautam mentioned, we would like to continue this momentum and hear from you. So we have some information that must be on your screens right now. We'd love to hear from you, and if you can reach out to us on our email IDs or any of the social media handles, we would like to take the conversation forward and try to see how we can together make an impact and collaborate. So on this note, we will close the Connect for Impact webinar series, and we'd love to get in touch with all of you. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Srinu. Thank you, all the panelists. Thank you, Rohini, for taking the time out. It was a wonderful session.
Thank you. Thank you too from our side.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.